Solving systems using elimination. So before, when you were doing systems, we did graphing, where you just graph the two systems and see where they cross. Then we did substitution, where you were substituting in either x or y to figure out the missing variable. Now we're going to solve using something called elimination. And how you do this, you just add or subtract the equations to eliminate a variable. Now these usually come in handy if it's in standard form. So if you don't have just like a y equals or an x equals, that substitution would be easy. Then you can use elimination. So if it's like x and y are on the same side of the equation, you can use elimination just to make your life easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to add or subtract to eliminate a variable. What you're looking for is that the variables have the same coefficient. So if we look at the x's, they have different coefficients. They both have 5, and they have 5 and they have 3. But if you look at y, they both have 6. So my goal is actually going to be to get rid of the y's. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the equations, okay, and we'll see what we get. So what you're going to do is just add the like terms. So I'm going to do 5 plus 3, okay, that gives me 8x. And then if you have negative 6 and you add 6, that's going to give you 0. So those actually cancel because you get 0. And then you just add negative 32 plus 48. That gives you 16. So you have 8x equals 16. Okay, and you get 0y there. So 8x equals 16. Now let's solve for x. How would you solve for x? Divide both sides by 8. So then you get x equals 2. Okay. So you have x, but remember you need to find x and y. So I'm going to pick one of these equations to plug in x so I can get y. I'm going to choose the second equation just for no reason. You can choose the first equation. I'm going to use the second equation. And I'm going to rewrite the second equation, but instead of x, I'm going to plug in 2. So I have 3 times 2 plus 6y equals 48. Now let's do 3 times 2. That gives me 6. Now what am I going to do? Subtract 6 on both sides. That gives me 6y equals 42. And now what do I do? Divide both sides by 6. So my y is 7. So my final answer, I do x and then I do y. So it's 2 comma 7. And that's solving using elimination. So let's do a couple more examples here. Okay. If we look at example A, which variable am I going to try to get rid of? Was it x or y that has the same coefficient? It's x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these two equations together. And now I have 6 plus negative 6. What does that give me? That gives me 0, so they're going to cancel. Negative 3 plus 5 gives me 2. And then 3 plus 3 gives me 6. And now I have 2y equals 6. How would I solve for y? Divide both sides by, oh, that should be 2. And then 6 divided by 2, y is going to be 3. So we found y, now we need to find x. So I'm going to pick one of these equations. I'm going to pick the first equation, okay? And I'm going to plug in y. So I'm going to plug in 3 for y. And now I got to solve for x. So what do I do first? I'm going to do 3 times 3, which gives me 9. Now what do I do? Add 9 to both sides. Now what do I do? Divide both sides by 6. And what is x? X is 2. So my final answer, x is 2, y is 3, so 2 comma 3. That's my final answer. Let's do one more here. So I have the x's here. I have a 3 and I have a 1, so those don't match. But for the y's, I have a 1 and a 1. Now what I'm going to do in this one, I can either add or I can subtract the equations. And I'm actually going to subtract these two equations. Okay? And the reason why is because if I add, if I do y plus y, 1 plus 1, that's going to give me 2. So they're not going to cancel. But if I do 1 minus 1, that's going to give me 0. So then they will cancel if I subtract. And now I just need to subtract everything else. Okay? So 3 minus 1 is going to give me what? 2x. And then 20 minus 12 is going to give me 8. So I have 2x equals 8. How do I solve for x? Divide both sides by 2. And x equals 4. And now I got to solve for y. So I'm going to pick this equation, just because you can pick any one you want. And I'm going to plug in 4 for x. And how do I solve for y? Subtract 4 from both sides, so what's y going to be? 8. And then I have my final answer, which is 4, 8. So go ahead and try the your turns, and then you can watch the video for page 7.